Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think I even need this, but. So my name is Sami Aziz. I'm the chaplain for Wesleyan University. I'm the founder of Common Ground Institute and Services. My website is commongroundservices.org. I started it about 2 years ago to educate the public on Islam, ISIS, Islamophobia, and related topics, and do refugee trainings. I've done some refugee trainings for multiple churches. We aim to be the Islamic consulting firm and education institution for Connecticut and New England on Islam. Because there's a lot of high level of curiosity, people are interested in the religion, but there's no avenue to learn. We want to be the place and the institution to provide that education. So how many of you have taken a class on Islam? Because I was going to go over the 5 pillars, but I don't know if I should go over the 5 pillars and some basics about Islam. Do you guys want me to go over that? So, okay, I'll go ahead and get into that first. This works. Okay, we'll skip the clip. So Islam is a universal religion. It's linked to Abrahamic religions unanimously, and by some scholar accounts linked to all religions. What does that mean? That means is just like Christianity and Judaism have many things from Prophet Abraham, Islam has similar things, like fasting, like prayer, like charity, the oneness of God. It's very similar to these religions, and that's an important point to make because a lot of people see, I think, America as a Judeo-Christian sort of country, and it's separate from any other religion, and especially Islam. Many, especially I would say evangelical Christians, are trying to make a separation between Islam and Christianity and sort of what American values are versus Muslim values. But I can say confidently, living here 27 plus years, I personally have had no issue being a Muslim in America. That's a false notion that you should be wary of. Peace is at the core of the religion, yet war is allowed for self-defense and for the help of the oppressed. And there's strict rules of war mandated within the religion. Just like in Christianity, you have just war theory, or you have the Geneva Convention for secular countries. You always had very strict rules for war. So there's no such thing as sort of this, just violent jihad of killing anybody like ISIS does. That's an extreme form. That's a psychological issue. That's not part of the religion. And the religion revolves around 5 pillars of practice and 6 pillars of belief. Internal peace is the essence and main aim of the religion. And that internal peace is constantly challenged by external distractions. So if you read the Quran, it's not a book that's advocating violence. It's mostly advocating internal peace and how to attain that peace through seeing the signs of God in nature, in the environment, in humanity. So the 5 pillars of practice for Muslims is the declaration of faith. Number 1, I swear there is no deity except God, and that Muhammad is his messenger. This begins a path of understanding, knowing, and connecting with the Creator. It's a decision that everyone has to make on their own. Nobody can be forced to be Muslim. And this is, again, a misnomer. It's often stated that Muslims are, very violent people who converted swaths of people, and it was spread by the sword. My country, India, where it's 200 million Muslims live there, 800 million of them are Hindus, and they lived under Muslim rule for over 500 years. The second pillar is prayer. We pray 5 times a day, facing the Kaaba. Mind, body, and soul are engaged in worship. And we're going to see a demonstration of prayer. Prayer is universal. Almost every religion in the world has prayer. And it's usually quite similar to Christianity and Judaism. Charity, and then also fasting and Hajj are other pillars of the religion. You guys know this stuff? Yeah, pretty much everybody knows this stuff? Okay. So how many of you have seen a Muslim pray? A few of you. And how many of you know the translation? I've seen the translation of the prayer. A few? Okay. So I'll show it and maybe halfway, and you can we'll skip that. Any questions so far while we're waiting for the PC? So Islam among refugees. Islam is not monolithic. There are a variety of views within Islam. There's Shias, there's Sunnis, and then within each sort of split between in Islam, the major split Sunni and Shia, you have sects or differences of opinion, schools of thought. It's just something to keep in mind because there is a view in America that Islam is one dark monolithic thing, right? So people are scared of Muslims and Sharia because they saw a few Muslims from Saudi Arabia on TV or Afghanistan or Iran doing some crazy things or really extreme things, and then people will apply that to all Muslims. So the next sort of subtopic is refugees. You can ask questions. Let's just make this a discussion. This is a little bit awkward. Any questions so far?
Among the refugees, a Syrian Muslim, for example, where's that person likely to fit into that scheme?
They're probably going to be Hanafi Muslim, and Sunni Hanafi, most likely. Yes.
Does that have a significance that those of us who aren't familiar should know about?
Yeah, so Hanafi Muslims, for example, they won't eat shrimp. Yeah. which is interesting.
No, I've heard that talked about among our groups. So
yeah, they won't eat crab, they won't eat lobster. And it's funny because the family in Bloomfield, they're Sunni Hanafis, and there was a bag of shrimp in their freezer. And I don't know who bought it, but I had forgotten to I was supposed to tell the group all the Islamic stuff for the group, but I had forgotten that one. And I left it in there because even though they're Hanafi, doesn't mean they won't eat it, but they're more likely not to eat it. Some Hanafis will, but very few of them. So refugees, there's 65.3 million people are displaced in 2015 by conflict and persecution. The first time in United Nations High Commission for Refugees that the 60 million threshold has crossed. 3.2 million people seeking asylum. This is the highest ever. And 40.8 million displaced in their own country. And this is a little graph that shows the trend of global displacement and proportions displaced from 1996 to 2015. So it's going up, unfortunately. And these are the major countries where refugees come from. And most of them are Muslim countries. Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, South Sudan, Congo, Central African Republic, Myanmar, Eritrea, and Colombia. So the point of showing this is that it's important to understand Islam and Muslims because most of the refugees are coming from Muslim countries. Right? Yes?
Do you think there's any correlation then, or why do you think that so many of these refugees are Muslim or coming from Muslim countries?
Yeah, so there's a lot of conflict in Muslim countries, for sure. There's a lot of interest by global powers in the Middle East, and they send them arms and weapons and fund groups, and it causes conflicts, right, when you fund groups. Also, a lot of these countries in the Middle East came out of colonization in the 1950s and 60s. They're young countries. They're still trying to figure out how to be a country. And people are discovering religion within the countries as well. Turkey, for example, they got their freedom around 1920 from the British. And the government that came into power was influenced by the French. And it was basically a dictatorship that tried to wipe out the religion. And so those sort of governments that are supported usually by the West, it causes a conflict for people, right? So we say we want democracy in the Middle East, but what we find is America, for example, is supporting many dictatorships with billions of dollars of weapons and money. So that creates a lot of conflict and hurt. The Arab Spring that recently happened, I read a report from Mother Jones magazine that water was a great part of that conflict. And I thought that was really interesting because it wasn't reported as a water conflict. It was reported as just people are rising up against the dictators.
That's what's driving thing in Africa as well.
Yeah.
Just terrible, terrible job.
Yeah. And then, once you come out of colonization, which was a very oppressive time period for Muslim countries, the conflicts didn't end, right? It continued because these were new nations. And so when you have conflict decade after decade, it creates real psychological issues in the minds of people, right? So we look at Iraq, it went to at least three decades of warfare. The Iran-Iraq war, over 1 million people died. Then there was the 2 Gulf Wars, there was an embargo. We're talking about millions of people either starving to death or dying because of bombs. This is the land in which ISIS was created, right? And it sort of makes sense because people are so fed up with warfare that they're willing to accept extremist ideologies to fix the problems in their country, right? The Taliban came out of the same thing. They went through the Russian invasion in the 80s, right? And then there was the war on terror. And the Taliban was an answer to the problems in that country after the Russian war, when there was a bunch of warlords across the country. And they said, you know what, we're going to follow the religion of Islam, we're going to be very extreme in our practice of it, and this is going to be the solution. Right? So I think when people look at these terrorist groups or these extremist groups, they think that, one, it has something to do with Islam, and two, it's just, that's just who they are. They're barbaric people out there. But if you just look at the last 10 years of any of these groups, what the situation was in the country, you're going to find, I think, an intense amount of conflict that created these groups. And I think that's really important for people to understand. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? So the end of the Obama administration, 110,000 refugees were allowed to come into the country. Trump slashed it to 50,000. In 2016, the United States took in 85,000. In contrast, Germany took in 441,000, Lebanon 1 million, Turkey 2.5 million, and Jordan 600,000.
It'd be good to have Canada's figures up there too. We settled a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Look into that. So, the fear of refugees is that they're going to come in and bring that, whatever we see on TV by ISIS or the Taliban or in Saudi Arabia, they're going to bring it to America. But the United States has a very thorough vetting process. 1% of refugees are actually resettled globally. 8 government agencies are involved. 6 security databases, 5 separate background checks, 4 biometric security checks, 3 separate in-person interviews. It's important to know this stuff because this is what people are going to say to you. Oh, refugees shouldn't come in this country because they may do something wrong. They may, anybody can do something wrong. Anybody can be a criminal. But statistically, refugees have been very good to this country. Of the 859,000 refugees admitted from 2001 onwards, only 3 have been convicted of planning terrorist attacks on targets outside of the United States, and none was successfully carried out, and this is by Cato Institute. None of the perpetrators of the major U.S. attacks carried out in the name of Islam in the past 15 years have come from the 7 nations on Trump's ban list. So this fear of refugees is not recent. If you go back to 2015, 30 governors signed executive orders saying that we don't want any refugees in our states. And I think one family was actually redirected from Ohio to Connecticut. It got a lot of press. But it's like an overblown fear that's really not based upon any rational information. So we're going to get into Islamophobia. Any questions so far? Or thoughts? Yes?
I know this is quite some time ago, but the numbers of the 60-something million people displaced and then 40 million within their own country, and then you said 3 million were seeking asylum. I was wondering what about the rest of those people? Because there's about 20 million that are missing in those numbers. What's the situation with that?
I don't know. I don't know beyond those numbers.
Okay, I'm just wondering.
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Good question. So the term Islamophobia was first introduced. Well, how many of you have heard the term Islamophobia? You've all heard it? Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, so it's a fairly new term in America. It was first introduced as a concept in a 1991 Runnymede Trust report and defined as unfounded hostility towards Muslims and therefore fear or dislike of all or most Muslims. So some of the points or prevailing attitudes that incorporate the following beliefs: Islam is monolithic and cannot adopt to new realities. So this idea that Islam is this one dark force of Sharia law, it's, everybody's hands being cut off, women are oppressed, all of these really extreme ideas about Islam that just aren't true in the daily lives of Muslims in most countries around the world. There's 50 majority Muslim countries. Each Muslim country practices Islam a bit differently. So a modern day example of Sharia would be Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has a minute level of alcohol in it. In Islam, it's unanimous that we're not supposed to drink alcohol. So the scholars in Turkey, examined what's called the prophetic tradition, the Hadith and the Quran, and they came to the conclusion that people or Muslims shouldn't drink Coca-Cola. They made a fatwa, they call it a legal edict, you could say, decree. And the scholars from my country, India, said it's okay. You can drink Coca-Cola because it burns off during the process. It's so minute of a level. But that's just an example that you'll never hear about, right? Of a daily sort of Sharia going on versus what you see on TV. Islam does not share common values with other major faiths. Again, this is false. Islam has many common values with all of the faiths, especially Christianity and Judaism. Islam as a religion is inferior to the West. It is archaic, barbaric, and irrational, right? So when you think of the word terrorist, you think of Muslim, and vice versa. If you say the word Muslim, many people will automatically think terrorist, especially if they've never met a Muslim, right? If all you know of Islam and Muslim is the TV and Hollywood and social media, you're going to think that. I would actually think that. So Islam is a religion of violence and supports terrorism. Islam is a violent political ideology. Now this last one is important because some of the Islamophobes in the current administration, they're trying to repeat this statement over and over again so it gets stuck in the minds of Americans. But Islam is not a religion, it's a political ideology, and therefore it needs to be fought off like any other political ideology, like communism, right? We need to bomb them, we need to kill them, we need to ban the Quran, etc. So this is a common sort of fear of Muslims, it's my fear when I go to the airport, that, and I'm sure it's going to be the fear of refugees as well. It is the fear of refugees, and Muslims in general. But that you're going to go to the airport and somebody's going to report on you, or the TSA is going to rough you up. So multiple times in the last few years, Muslims have been pulled off of planes for saying something in Arabic. Right? And Arabic is a universal language for all Muslims. So we all say, for example, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, or wa alaikum assalam, peace be upon you, as a response to that. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. So there's words and phrases that no matter where you're from in the Muslim world, you're probably going to include them in your vocabulary. So when I go to the airport, I try not to say those words. I should never have that fear. No person should have that fear in America, but I do have it because people were pulled off planes and interrogated by the FBI and police. There was one incident in which a math teacher was pulled off who was not Muslim, and he was just doing math, but the person on the plane who reported him thought he was writing down Arabic. So Arabic, the language itself, is scaring people because they associate Arabic with Muslims, right? Because that's what they see on TV. So there's campaigns now. For example, somebody made a bag and they just wrote some phrase like, this is a bag that's written in Arabic. But they wrote it in Arabic, and you could purchase it and walk around with it. You're supposed to walk around with it so that people see the Arabic and then they get over the fear. But this is something that we need to get over. Also, the fear of the Quran is sort of linked to that as well. So I had a lady buy a Quran from me. She said that her sister told her that she couldn't take the Quran on the plane. Right? That's completely false. You can take a Quran on the plane. Will they harass you? It's possible. I try not to show it. I'll put it in my bag or I'll check it in because I do have that fear. But that's something we as a nation and as a people need to get over because the book itself is very beautiful. So this is something to think about for yourselves, and I'm sure none of you have this issue, but maybe somebody in your family does, somebody among your friends, that when they think of Muslim or terrorist, it's interchangeable, but it shouldn't be interchangeable because there's terrorists of all colors, shapes, religions. Yes.
As a non-Muslim, and for non-Muslims or people who don't speak Arabic, is there anything we can do to sort of help, kind of destigmatize, just like the Arabic language, or like you were talking about someone who's walking around with a bag and that letter?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I can think of. One is the bag, and I need to find the website so people can buy them and just walk around with them. Two, there's a sign, it's actually in my car, that says like, "You're welcome here." And it has it in 3 languages, English, Arabic, and Spanish, and you can put them in your front yard. Also, I've seen churches put up signs like, "Well, we welcome immigrants," or Muslims, right? I think that's a really cool thing to do as well. So those are some of the things I can think of, and I'll have some more slides about that. So I'll end at 7. Should I end by 7 o'clock, which is about 15 minutes?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I would say 9/11 was a pivotal moment for Islamophobia in America, because the mentality afterwards by many people, and I heard people say this from their own mouths on a school bus when I was going home on the day after 9/11, a kid said to me, or a kid said on the bus, "We should nuke them all," right? So this was the attitude that there's a bunch of people over there, they're barbaric, they're brown, we don't like them, we need to nuke them. And we did end up nuking a lot of countries and killing a lot of people. There's a report called Body Count by Physicians for Social Responsibility, and they track over 1 million deaths in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and many other countries. So we have this, yearly Never Forget campaign, right? You've all seen it. And what are we never we're supposed to never forget that this tragedy happened. And the problem I have with the whole campaign is it's creating this dichotomy of us versus them, right? There are these Muslims, they bombed America, and what we forget is that there were Muslims who died in the Twin Towers, 25 innocent Muslims who died in the Twin Towers. It's never mentioned, right? We forget the Muslims who responded among the NYPD and the fire department and other volunteers who were Muslim to the tragedy, right? So instead of it being a tragedy of criminals against all people in America, it became Muslims versus Americans, right? So there's a lot of exhibits, memorials, displays, and we had one at Wesleyan University recently, and they're across America, and these things will be left out. Any sort of idea that Muslims may have been innocent, or there were innocent Muslims, or innocent fire department or NYPD, these are all left out. And I think these need to be incorporated into the talk around this subject matter, right? So that's what I'm trying to do at Wesleyan. They have an exhibit at Wesleyan University where they have like 400 photos and a video, and I asked them, can you please include photos of the 25 innocent Muslims? People need to see their story. Because every time they see these exhibits, they hate Muslims more. It just creates hate of Muslims, right? What do you guys think about that, actually? I want to get your feedback. Yeah.
I think that's an amazing idea. Have you been to the memorial in New York?
Yes.
Do they have that?
They do not have the names. Oh, they may have the 25 Muslim names. They should have the names on the yeah. Well,
I know
yeah.
They have the names of everyone who died.
Yes.
I don't know if they have anything specifically for. I think I can't imagine if they have that. I haven't been
Yeah.
to
That's a good point, and maybe that would be a goal for us all to work on. And I think that, if anything, that would sort of help humanize Muslims and humanize refugees. Yeah. The 9/11 memorial, by the way, had two controversies. One was they wanted Arabic pamphlets among the other languages, and people didn't like that. Again, that fear of Muslims and Arabic, and that Muslims are responsible, so we don't want anything associated with Muslims with this memorial. And the second was a mosque nearby, which they wanted to shut down.
It was a community center. It wasn't necessarily.
It was a community center. They had a room for prayer. But it doesn't matter if it was a mosque or not. It should be allowed. It had nothing to do with 9/11. Yes?
In response to this, as we know, like every year around 9/11, there is a lot of people on social media kind of sharing, like, oh, I was 3 years old when 9/11 happened, and sharing their stories. And again, like, kind of breeds that fear. So there's, over the past few years, there's been this campaign called After 9/11, where a lot of Muslims have shared their stories of like how 9/11 affected their lives. just to provide some nuance to the debate.
Nice. So I'm just going to talk really quickly just so I can get through these next 10 minutes with the rest of the stuff I have. So 62% of Americans, according to Pew Research, have never met a Muslim. Right? So their whole view of Islam is TV and Hollywood. If I was among the 62%, I would be scared of Muslims. These are two graphs that show from Pew Research how Americans view Muslims. The one on the right, it just asked the general public, what do you think of these different religious groups? And Muslims came out at the bottom. On the left, they asked Democrats and Republicans. So among Republicans, Muslims came out at 33, which is very low. And then Democrats, 47. So now we have statistical data that backs up sort of what we already kind of knew, which is that Americans tend to see Muslims as very negative, or Islam. This is a graph of anti-Muslim incidents after the election, 111. So a lot of the anti-Muslim incidents we don't get to see in mainstream media. If you want to know about them, you should go on this website, Council on American Islamic Relations, sign up for their email list, and you're going to get email updates on a regular basis. You can also check them out on Facebook. So Islamophobia in politics, people stated that Obama was a secret Muslim, right, who was taking over America. And this was not sort of like a side thing. This was a real fear in the hearts of many Americans. They really believed he was a secret Muslim, and he had a fake birth certificate, and he studied in a madrasa, and he's trying to do stuff with this country. If you type in Obama and Muslim, you're going to see tons of anti-Muslim, anti-Obama links, anti-Obama pictures all over the internet. And then Colin Powell got involved in this. The video probably doesn't work, but that was interesting. So here are some websites that track and fight Islamophobia: care.com, southernpovertylawcenter.org, ACLU, islamophobia.org, and americanprogress.org. Highly recommend islamophobia.org. It has a list of individuals and organizations that live their lives bashing Muslims. Literally, that's their full-time job, writing articles, books, videos, and then also trainings for FBI, police, and libraries. They'll get into the craziest places, and then CARE will have to call them and be like, hey, did you know you just invited somebody who's an Islamophobe? Usually they won't know, because they come out and they say, we are an expert on Islam, and there's no way to verify that information, so people believe them, because they wrote a book on Islam, right? They wrote an article, they have a PhD or a master's. But if you look at their track record, which CARE has at islamophobia.org, you find them just making the most ridiculous statements, generalizations, or just making outright lies about Islam. So that's really important if you want to defend Muslims or refugees, that we become educated on this group and look out for these people. They come to your cities, into your libraries, into your schools. They were just, one of these, Hayyan Hirsi Ali, was at Fairfield University. And Fairfield University didn't know what they did until they signed the contract with her, which was for $15,000. And afterward, they figured it out. But yeah, so they get into a lot of places and they convince people to pay them a lot of money. So how to be an ally? I would say educate yourself, right? Go to islamophobia.org, go to Muslim Advocates, Council on American Islamic Relations, Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. Educate others, right? You probably have relatives, family members, somebody you know who's really Islamophobic. They've never met a Muslim. I see you smiling over there.
Both my parents voted for Donald.
Okay. Yeah, so there's people like that, which we all know. And by sharing a picture with a Muslim, especially one wearing his hijab like Iman, on your Facebook page, right? It's going to challenge your parents' view of Muslims, that your daughter or son is going to school with Muslims, right? And they survived meeting them. They didn't get blown up, right? Which is the view out there. Humanize Muslims. So there's campaigns now, like Humans of New York, to humanize Muslims. This is one website, MuslimsForAmericanProgress.org, where they have pictures and stories of Muslims who are contributing positively to America. So you should share those stories at University of Connecticut, right? You have great people going to school here who happen to be Muslim, right? You can share their stories and sort of humanize them maybe on campus. Famous Connecticut Muslims. I just wanted to show this because we have some amazing people in Connecticut who are affecting America nationally. So the guy in the middle is Tariq Farid, the founder of Edible Arrangements. He's making love all over America, right? Bringing people together. The past mayor of South Windsor, on the bottom right, the Bosnian, he came to America after the genocide by Christians of Muslims, and he started a successful real estate company in Wethersfield. And on the top right is a company called Knight Construction. It's a Muslim-owned, founded, and operated company, and they build churches, libraries, schools, universities, police stations, a whole bunch of stuff all over New England, right? So you have a Muslim company literally building America, right? And it's a story that most Americans don't know. They never get to hear these stories. Run for office. So if you're going to run for student government, or you guys did an amazing thing, you just started your own organization and said, we're going to do it ourselves. These are ways that you can include Muslims through these positions. Do a survey about the issue. So see how many people at UConn dislike Muslims. Do a survey. Or have met a Muslim, right? Ask these questions in a survey. So once you get the results, you may be shocked. On your own campus, how many people have never met a Muslim, or hate Muslims, or dislike Muslims, or have misconceptions about them. And then once you have the data, you could show the administration and be like, hey, we need to spend like 50 grand hiring a Muslim chaplain and fighting this because people here really hate Muslims and this is not good for our campus, and if you don't do it, we're going to show these results to the newspaper and it's going to make you guys look bad, something like that. Just joking. Okay, that's not good, right? So be an ally, demonstrate. So at Wesleyan, we did Jummah on the Green, where we did Jummah in the center of campus, in front of everybody, and we had 60 non-Muslims make a circle around us during the service. It's a 30-minute service where somebody gives a sermon and they do a prayer. And it was just an amazing scene at the center of campus, right? Very beautiful. Solidarity protest. There's other ideas that we could talk about. Challenge print and broadcast media, right? Opinion pieces, press releases, invite reporters. If you see a magazine, a newspaper, a newscaster spreading hateful statements, challenge it. Engage in community service. Start a club. So University of Pennsylvania started an Islamophobia club where they focus just on this topic. Interfaith club is something we started at Wesleyan University so that Muslims, Christians, Jews, people of all faiths can sort of do events on campus that show the faith of each and how similar they are. Versus all the focus on the news is how different we are. So this brings all the similarities. Ally within your field. So every one of you is majoring in some topic and subject, right? Mathematics, science, teaching, police, whatever it is you're majoring in, I guarantee you there are Muslims who have contributed positively to your field. So you want to learn about them and then use them in your field to educate others. So to give you an example, has anybody been to the Sears Tower? A few? So do you remember there's a statue when you walk in? Who the statue is? Do you remember the name? The guy's name is Fazlur Rahman. He's a Pakistani Muslim. He designed and made that building. And the technology that went into that building in the 1960s went into almost every building in the world after that, right? That's a huge contribution. So if you're doing mechanical engineering or civil engineering, that's something you would want to share within your field with your colleagues, etc., to humanize Muslims. So there's a website, 1001inventions.com. It talks about inventors in the Muslim world from the past. Phone banks. So this is something that you could do on campus. It's not difficult. You get together in a room and then you call your senators, your house people, and you ask them for something, whatever it is. Like, don't stop bombing this country, or allow more refugees to come in. So you just call them, and when you have like 50 people call, it's supposed to show them that this is something that their constituents are interested in and that they should do. So CARE will sometimes have campaigns. ACLU will have campaigns. So if you subscribe to their email list, you'll see what they want you to call about, and then you can decide if that's something you want to do a phone bank around. So Common Ground Institute, and I would say also probably CARE, are looking for interns, volunteers, in many capacities, to speak, to educate, to write op-eds, to do graphic design. So if you're interested, you can email me and we can talk more about doing an internship. This is an image of a mosque that burned down recently in, I think, Texas, somewhere in the South. And this is the response from some of the neighbors, which was to come out, be supportive, and donate money. And I thought that was really awesome. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I think that's it. Let's see if this video works.
Do you want to like go to full screen?
There's like the gum.
Go to the smaller screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to skip to the link?
Have you guys seen this, Islamophobia? Yeah, it's pretty funny. I don't know if it works. Any questions while we're hoping this works? Any thoughts? Yes.
So Trump just bombed a bunch of Assad's military bases in Syria. So it's kind of started like a whole new wave of militarism on the U.S.'s part. And with that, there's kind of going to be a whole other wave of Islamophobia. So how do we like combat that as it's happening and as people are kind of spreading this?
Yeah, I really, really believe, and I know this is going to sound maybe superficial, but I really believe it comes down to education. Like the statistic by Pew Research, 62% of Americans have never met a Muslim. That's pretty bad. And even the other 38% that have met a Muslim, I imagine they didn't get any like real conversation. They didn't have a real conversation with them, right? So like what you guys just did now, right? This presentation that I'm giving, that's what we need to do. I really believe we need to get Muslims to, and even non-Muslims, it doesn't have to be Muslims, to go out there and give real information about Muslims, real stories. I've heard so many amazing stories from white people telling me that of their positive interaction with Muslims and how beautiful they are, right? So those are the type of stories that we need to get out there. People ask me this question often: why don't Muslims speak out against terrorism, right? And I said, look, I do it actually on a weekly basis. I have an ISIS presentation, but you've never heard about it, right? There are Muslim scholars who go on national TV, CNN, NPR. Tahirah goes on some of them, right? But they only get 10 minutes of airtime versus an ISIS beheading that gets 3 weeks. Right? So I think it's just an active campaign of just getting this word out there through many sources, right? Social media, videos, infographics. It's a long campaign. It's not a short one. I'm actually looking for a grant now, so I can start hiring people because I think this is like this is a massive project. It's not a small project. Like just Connecticut itself, right? It's a small state, but let's say Connecticut has 5,000 public schools, right? 1,000 libraries, 2,000 churches. Each of those public schools are going to want a Muslim or somebody to come back every year to educate the new grade, right? So now we're talking about hiring people on a massive level just for Connecticut to educate all of these places on a regular basis so that we can reprogram or deprogram people from believing that Muslims are terrorists to them believing that Muslims are fellow citizens. Yes?
Now, can I just add one thing? You
Sure,
mentioned
please.
how a lot of people say, oh, why don't Muslims condemn this or why don't we speak out against this? One of my friends actually made a website that's called MuslimsCondemn.com. So you can put in literally anything, ISIS, Boko Haram, anything you want, and you'll find a whole list of Muslims, prominent Muslims, leaders, politicians, whatever, who have condemned it.
Yes,
So
that's
a
awesome.
good website to have in your toolkit. It's literally just MuslimsCondemn.com.
Yeah, is that the one where she made like 5,000?
Yeah, so she had a Google Drive spreadsheet first, and
Yes.
now she made a website.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, I heard that campaign.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say just keep doing these presentations. Yeah.
Do you think that like schools could hire like refugees to do the education about Muslims? Do you think that'd be like a good pool of people to pull from?
Yeah, I think there would be an excellent pool. So, okay, let me just mention one more thing before I give it off
Do
to
you
the
think your
panel.
neighbor is a terrorist?
Hey, how you doing?
Okay, the video's working.
Hey! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
Does your fear of Muslims get in the way of living a normal life?
No! He's coming! Did he call in Uber? Yeah, we'll take the next one. It's fine. All right.
You saw the app?
I didn't know. It said Mo. I didn't know.
Do you judge people by their outer appearance? Introducing Islamophobia, now in an easy and convenient chewing gum. Starts working within 5 minutes to relieve bigotry and intolerance. Call your doctor if your Islamophobia worsens or you have hallucinations that discrimination isn't real. Side effects include fondness, brotherhood, acceptance, loss of bigotry, increase in rationality, and possible denouncement of superiority.
I didn't realize I had a problem, but admitting is the first step.
Islamophobia worked for me. Ask your doctor if it's right for you.
So to answer your question, I wrote a resolution that's been passed in 2 towns in Connecticut, and it's up in like 5 other towns in Connecticut and a couple in Massachusetts. And it's a so you guys know about the sanctuary movement, I assume, right? Pretty much everybody. So the sanctuary movement is, to protect undocumented immigrants primarily. But I think in this age, Muslims are probably the most vulnerable population because we don't have the infrastructure, and we're very small, we're very new to this country. So when I looked around at all the sanctuary documents across America at campuses and cities, I didn't find anything about Muslims in them. So I drafted a resolution, and it protects many oppressed groups, including Muslims, because we're afraid, for example, of police training at the local level being anti-Muslim, because it's going to come down from the administration, or textbooks being changed or affected in a negative way because it's going to come from the education secretary, for example. So in that resolution, we created a task force to review previous laws and future laws, but also we emphasized in the resolution that any training regarding any oppressed group should come from the community itself, right? So we're trying to address it through that resolution, actually, that exact thing that you're saying. Because for a school district to hire refugees or Muslims, you need to have like laws or resolutions in place for them to encourage them to do it. They're not going to just do it, most likely, unless there's a resolution or law in the town or the state level that forces them to do it. Kind of like disability laws, right? Until they were forced by the government to make ramps for disabled people, nobody was interested in spending thousands of dollars making disabled ramps. And I think it's a similar situation. But that would be a great thing to work on and make happen. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think it's wrong that, we were talking earlier about how Muslims have to kind of speak out about how they're not violent or things. I just find that, just insulting and kind of wrong that, it's not Muslims that they have to feel the need to speak out and say, that I'm not like this horrible person. I just think, that's the importance of allies and kind of trying to, take away, that stigmatization.
Yes, I 100% agree with you. It's something we shouldn't have to do, but I feel if we don't do it, it's going to hurt us. So we have to do it. Yeah. I really honestly believe the current administration is in power because there was a real fear of Muslims that they used to drive people's votes. And it will continue to be used until we go out there and speak. But thank you for recognizing that. So I'll turn it over to the panel. And the panel has people who are way more knowledgeable than I am. So they'll be able to answer more questions and get more into this. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So Yasin, you're going to have a seat, right?
How you guys all? Is this on?
You probably don't need it.
Working quite right. The AV guy.
You can turn it off.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we got it.
Is anybody having trouble hearing?
No, you probably don't need it.
Probably don't need a mic.
I don't think
Is it good for the camera without the? Alright. I don't like these anyway. Alright, you guys still awake? You guys doing alright? Good. I'm Yasin Ahmed. I'm a chaplain at Trinity College. I'm doing a master's in Muslim Christian Relations at Harvard Seminary. I teach your daughter in Islamic school. I teach
Oh,
Sami
my daughter.
I hope these kids don't have kids.
Okay, who's over there?
Yeah, we're going to Chicago Islamic school.
It's been a long day.
My daughter. Maybe I'll teach some of your kids, I don't know. Also, I'm a chaplain at Rosemary High School in Wallingford. So I'm doing this stuff now, so help Sami on occasion. I'll be emceeing. If you have questions, just go ahead and ask them. We have a really great panel. If you guys could introduce yourself, Hugh first, and then Ms. Tahirah.
My introduction is very short. I'm Hugh McLean. The reason I'm here, I guess, is that I have been in the refugee resettlement business is the wrong word. I've had experience, practical experience. In fact, I learned on the job about refugee resettlement the first time 21 years ago. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm here because I think it's one of the best things that I've ever done.
My name is Tahirah Amatal-Wadud. I'm an attorney. I live in Springfield. I have 7 kids. So my claim to fame is that over the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to work on some pretty significant cases involving hatred toward Muslims. And that has just turned my life into something I don't even recognize anymore. So I am speaking all of the time. I love the opportunity to come together like this because I feel like once we start exchanging ideas and just talking about things, things will get better. This morning I was at an interfaith breakfast at Westfield State University in Westfield, Massachusetts, talking about interfaith relationships and interfaith relations. And I love to tell people that I didn't appreciate the gift that was my family, and that is that I was born into a Christian family, and that my parents became Muslim when I was a toddler, and that their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents before them were Christian. And so my life has always incorporated a major interfaith presence. And then my brother married a girl whose grandmother is Jewish, so we have the whole Abrahamic faith thing there. And it never dawned on me how absolutely unique a perspective I have because of that gift. And so I like to share that when I speak because we're going to get there. We're going to get there.
We are going to get there.
Yeah, we are.
Absolutely.
We are.
Thank you for your introduction. If I could just kind of get a little bit of backstory on how you got involved with refugees initially and what made you continue your work with them.
I attribute it to an act of God. And that's my interpretation. From the outside, I don't think that's quite what it looks like. I answered the phone, and it was a plea that from the Episcopal refugee resettlement people in New Haven saying, we have a refugee family coming tonight, and the sponsor has backed out. Do you know anybody who can take the refugee family for a night while we can find a sponsor? And I said, first I wondered why they were calling me, and maybe you should ask that. They were calling me because I was on the phone, answering the phone for Plowshares Institute. And Plowshares comes from the Isaiah, Jeremiah, what is it? Anyway, the passage, they should beat their swords and plowshares and learn more, know more. So this is a Christian, run by some Christian ordained people, trying to figure out how to do some practical peacemaking. And this appealed to me because I had a Quaker background in education, and one of the principles of the American Friends folks, who are known as Quakers, is that peace is obligatory. Working for peace, nonviolent conflict resolution is up our alley. And we work around the world. That is, the Quakers work around the world. I'm not associated with Quakers other than by choice. So, with that background, what happened was quite an accident because at that moment, my mother, who was ailing, had suffered a stroke, and we had to move her out of the house that she was living in to be near me into a nursing home. So the call comes for a refugee family who needs a sponsor. I had a house. My kids were away at college or beyond college, I'm not sure where. We had an empty house of our own. I had nothing to do other than go to work every so often. So I said, that sounds like a call to me. And I responded. And 21 years later, they are now living in Florida. The youngest daughter in that family has earned her PhD at this institution, no, her master's degree at this institution, has a PhD in physical therapy, is now a well-positioned person in the hospital system down there and doing quite well. Her husband is doing his own business. And we had a good visit with them just a month ago. They're doing well. And in the meantime, we're doing some more refugee resettlement in Windsor. And this has just been, for me, a very fulfilling experience on all fronts. I think is that enough for that?
Yeah.
What country were they from?
They were from Ukraine. The younger daughter knew a little English, and she picked up the English quite fast because she was in 7th grade when she came, so that was a big help. And they lived with us for 2 months. 2 weeks, I'm sorry, and then moved to my mother's house.
One of the things that's coming to mind is when Muslims are addressing Islamophobia, is this something that only benefits Muslims, or does it benefit other minority groups? What is the relationship between defending against Islamophobia and defending just the rights of people in general?
That's a great question. I think it's all of our civic duty to speak out against any type of bigotry. That means if it's happening to you, if it's happening to me, that we have to speak out against it. And it's not just that speaking out against Islamophobia only helps me as a Muslim, because I enjoy a privilege in this country in that I don't have challenges with language or immigration or other things that my other Muslim brothers and sisters may have challenge with. And so when I speak out against acts of hate, I am defending the rights of women, immigrants, children, elderly, sick, poor, people of all races, all socioeconomic classes, and so there's a benefit all the way around. The same way is if you're a feminist and you're asserting the rights of women, you're not just helping women, you're helping an entire community by empowering whatever policy you feel is necessary to articulate yourself on.
Do you, one of the things that I hear when I'm doing interfaith work is how much interfaith work was going on before 9/11 and afterwards, and how has it changed in terms of the Muslim community?
Well, my experience anecdotally, and I'm 43 years old, so I was grown when 9/11 happened. My son, who's now about to graduate college, must have been in the 3rd grade. It was his birthday. And I didn't say that, I didn't tell you this, but I used to hate doing interfaith work. Like when I was younger, and it'd be like these projects, oh, you want to join a teen interfaith committee? I'm like, no, I'm Muslim, she's Christian, he's a Jewish person. I don't need that, because I realized I already had it. I was raised with it. So I didn't need it to be manufactured in my particular life, which I didn't realize was my pushback until fairly recently with some of the work that I've been doing. But has it increased? I think it most certainly has increased, because we have a significant population of Muslims who maybe in coming to the country didn't know where they fit, or how to have those conversations. Like I could begin a conversation opener with, my uncle runs a church, one of the largest churches in Syracuse, and already a barrier is broken in an interfaith conversation. But not everybody has that. that lead in. So I think we are seeing Muslims be more intentional about opening their doors, having conversations, and we're also seeing people of other faiths being more open-minded. One of the scariest things that we can do as humans is put ourselves in spaces that we don't know if we belong in. You know how many synagogues and churches I've been in the past year? A lot. Not because I thought this was something really groovy to do, but because I had to be purposeful in getting to know my neighbor and getting to be known by my neighbor. 62% of Americans say they don't know a Muslim, but I always push back on that statistic and say they don't know that their dentist is a Muslim. They don't know that their child's coach is a Muslim. But now let's talk about it. And what does it mean to be Muslim? So yeah, we are. I think we as an entire community, Muslim, non-Muslim, are definitely putting a lot of thought into interfaith connections. And of course, I'm sure Imam Aziz must have talked about the fact that Muslims incorporate and believe in all of the other two Abrahamic religions, Judaism and Christianity. And when we're not giving that education in the public school system, we're not telling second graders and third graders and fourth graders that, then they grow up to be 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds who don't know.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a lawyer, family law attorney. She asked me, do your kids celebrate Christmas? And I said, no, I'm Muslim. So she's an attorney, she's in family law, she also has a couple other positions in the community. She says, well, what holidays do you celebrate? And I start telling her about Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha, and one of them is the commemoration of Prophet Abraham and his willingness to sacrifice his son. And she looked at me and she was like, you believe in that? And I said, yes, I do. And I was scared and said, well, you don't know that? But we lack religious literacy in this country.
We do.
Yeah.
We lack religious literacy. So then I asked her about her own belief, because she identified as Christian, and I said, well, do you believe, because not all denominations believe this way about Jesus, son of Mary, whom the Muslims do indeed love, do you believe in the return of Christ? And she said, I don't know what my religion teaches me on that issue. And I said, well, you have to figure that out. You can't dissect what I believe if you don't know the basic tenets of your own belief. I don't care what your belief is, that's yours to own, just know it, learn it. That is what you have to do.
I can respond a little bit to that too in my own experience. I think I got my first introduction to this kind of business in my own family. My parents didn't know it, but two of my siblings are gay. My parents had no clue. And I knew, but I had no clue either. I didn't have a frame of reference to even talk about it in the 1950s. That says something about my age, doesn't it? I like to be the oldest person in the room, so I'm comfortable here. I wish I could relate a little bit better. I drive my grandchildren nuts too. But I got an introduction to what this means when our church began to think about what it meant to be church, when we had the Stonewall stuff going on, and gay power, and AIDS, and so forth. And I had a brother who was in New York City working for the city of New York, trying to find housing for AIDS victims in a very difficult environment. He was putting in the early 80s, I guess. He was putting his life on the line, and my church didn't know what to do about gay people. And so we did a little education. And what I'm trying to say is this is all the same issue in different forms. And it is very rewarding and fulfilling work no matter where you do it. And I am proud to say that my church hired a gay organist and musician who wasn't just gay, he was flamboyantly gay. And he turned that congregation on their heads. And he left us, unfortunately. It was one of the sad days of my life. But that was a different place after he was there. And I think it still is. So it's a personal thing. If you can meet people and discover they're not, they don't have claws and fangs.
It's interesting to call them aliens. Legal aliens or immigrants. One thing I would like to get your thoughts on, I think one of the things that undergirds a lot of the issues we're having is this lack of empathy. What is at the core of this lack of empathy? Or like, how do we develop it or nurture it and culture it? Or both of you are,
I could take a stab at that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way to overcome that fear of the other, the unknown, other than getting close to it and getting to know that that is not a real fear. One of the experiences I had a year ago, within the past year, is to talk with the former Fish and Wildlife Director for the state of Pennsylvania. And at the time he was working in that capacity, he was in charge of all the bears in Pennsylvania. It was his responsibility to look after those bears. He took that responsibility very seriously. And he related one situation where there was a guy that bought a house in the woods, a lovely house. It wasn't right in the woods, but he moved in not knowing that there was a family of bears living under the porch. Not a family living under the porch, but a mom used under the porch for a den. And one morning he wakes up, and there's a bear in his backyard, and he calls him. He says, I gotta get rid of this bear. So this guy turned up at the house, and he said, okay, it's early in the spring. Mom's just woken up, and she's got cubs to feed, and if you could wait just a few weeks, the bears will leave once the cubs are able to fend for themselves a little bit. So just hold steady. I can't do this. So he cajoled him for a little bit, and they lived through that first season. And he got, as the time went on, he got a little more and more comfortable having a bear under the porch, and eventually a cub appeared, and that was the changing thing, because that cub was so cute. If you've never seen a bear cub, you want to grab it, but don't do it when the mom's looking. So they got through that season. So he promised, the guy that was in charge of the bears promised that he would find a way to resettle that bear someplace else so he wouldn't come back to that den. He said, no, don't worry about that. I'm okay. He said, just that one little experience. But I say that because that's what it takes. And that's what it takes when you meet a gay person. It's what it takes when you meet a black person. And what it takes when you meet a black Muslim. I mean, a woman. Holy, you got the whole thing. And I am proud to sit up here because I know she's going to tolerate me because I'm old enough not to be too scary. And that's one of the benefits of getting old. You don't frighten people anymore. Women will talk to me. They both talk to me, but sometimes I've had other things on my mind. And anyway, let's not go there. My wife is a lot more comfortable with me talking to women now too.
That's all right. Ms. Tahirah, something that stuck out from one of your previous responses is about the intentionality of the interfaith work. Could you talk a little bit about strategic alliances and what you're thinking and other Muslim leaders or interfaith workers are thinking in terms of what they're trying to accomplish and who they're trying to align themselves with?
What I see happening is that I look at mosques and congregations that serve Muslims as realizing that we need to open our doors, we need to be accessible, we need to demystify ourselves, And there are a lot of efforts taking place, especially, I happen to be privy to Massachusetts, particularly to open doors, and the neighbors are coming and they're eating food and they're seeing the kids, and that's really important. And at the Islamic Society of Western Massachusetts, which is in West Springfield, they've been doing interfaith outreach for a while, and I've only just sort of started working with the community there, helping, and it's incredible how many allies that mosque has, to the point where December 14th, we had about 400 or 500 people. People came in buses from counties all over to come and sit and listen. And what I was telling the organizers, what I was telling the board, is that these people aren't coming just to eat your biryani. They're coming because they want to problem solve. And the board knew that I was right, but we didn't have the capacity to really manage and marshal all of that. And I got to give one of the talks, which I think was one of the most significant things and events of my life. And I couldn't let that night go to waste without giving all of those people a call to action. And what I said, because you asked about the intentionality of coalition building, one of the things that I said was, you're all here. Hold on tight to your congregations. Whatever religion you practice, whatever church you came from, whatever synagogue you came from, when the call comes that you're needed, it's not just going to be a random phone call to you. It's going to be a call congregation to congregation, because you can mobilize people like that. And develop and fortify your social justice component of your church, of your synagogue, because all of our religions have some aspect of social activism. And work on that, right? I don't have the answers. I don't have a sign-in sheet. God, Lord, we would never be able to get a sign-in sheet for that night. But when the call comes for whatever it is that we need, congregation to congregation, that's how it's going to be done. And we've seen it happen. We have seen it happen. We've had some anti-Semitic writing up in one of the mountains, in one of the parks. And the call came, congregation to congregation, let's stand together, let's wash it off, let's give speeches, let's pray. It's happening in a big way, because you don't even know what that's supposed to look like. So I'm an ally. Now what do I do? I signed up. What is it that you need me to do? Well, we'll know when the time comes, and people have been doing it. And it's not as scary as it seems.
I gotta write that down.
It's not as scary as it seems.
Have you faced any challenges in building these coalitions? And
I can't say that I can think that I other than how to actually marshal it, not really challenges. Maybe I'm very lucky that the people that are around us and surround us are like-minded. And so they all know that they want to do something, they want to be there. And if I can, just for a minute, at that dinner, there was a man there, and he, my family is also interracial as well, so we have Muslims of different colors and stuff. So when I say this, I don't intend to be offensive, but there was a gentleman there. He was Caucasian. He was probably in his 30s, and he's at the mosque, and he sees me, he stops, and he says, "Oh, I really enjoyed your comments." And I said, "Thank you." And something about him made me stop. There were so many people there, but the way he said it, and he had these two little boys with him, and they were about maybe 8 and 9, and they were waiting to get their plate of biryani, which they had earned.
That's why people came.
That's why people came. But he said to me, "I don't know a Muslim. I've never been in a mosque. I didn't know what I was coming here for and to do, but I knew I needed to be here." And I stood there with my mouth. I don't know what I said to him, but my jaw dropped. Not because he was there, not because he had a plate waiting to get his food, but because he brought his children. And I said, wow, if this community was scary, or you didn't know what message I was going to get up and say, or what Pastor so-and-so was going to say, or Imam so-and-so was going to say, you wouldn't bring your children. But he did. And those kids looked very happy, and he was happy that he came. That touched me. Putting yourself in spaces that you don't know how you're going to fit. That's what he did. And he stayed for dinner.
Where you actually build the connections. I know when I was in college, I would be in an Episcopalian church, and that's where I got to learn more about Christianity when I was actually at the dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How much is one of the questions that activists, people who want to get involved with this type of work, they try to figure out how much effort do I put in versus with the people that are willing to join me versus the ones who are the ones acting against me, right? So some of the interfaith work we do, the people call us and they say, we want to meet a Muslim, right? They're not the ones who hate Muslims. So where do you, in terms of energy, in terms of resources, where do you put it?
I don't go looking for trouble, right? Someone had asked this question the other day or something. I was like, how do we sit at the table with people who disagree with us? That was the question. Like, let's look for an opportunity to talk to the ones who thought that Donald Trump had the answers. How do we do that?
Right.
And there are people who specialize in peacemaking and bridge building, and they can moderate conversations. My personal preference is to build the relationships with the people who want to build the relationships with me. And I think that, in my opinion, that those are the smaller steps. So this young lady said that her parents voted that way. And I think that as she starts to lead her parents a little bit in sharing what she learns, showing pictures of herself in certain meetings, or saying, oh, do you realize that Muslims believe in Jesus Christ? And those are the little things that are going to change minds and hearts. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the folks that voted that way. Mm-hmm. It just may mean, and they may still vote that way even after they get to know you. But let's talk about, because it's fair to say that religion may have driven the election in a negative way. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about what that religion is, what it means, how it's defined, and what its inherent convictions are.
Yeah.
And then move forward.
Yeah. I know you wanted to comment a little bit.
Yeah. Let's see if I can remember what it was.
Putting your energy versus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree. Don't go looking for trouble is the only way. If what you're doing doesn't feed you, you can't feed anybody else. If that's anxiety producing, you can't overcome that. That's the work of the spirit in whatever I know about religion. All you can do is kind of create opportunities and work around the edges. You might try watching the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and try to imagine how that's going to play out when you bring a Muslim home for dinner.
I don't know, I've already brought home Jewish boyfriends, Buddhist boyfriends, Hindu best friends.
How was that?
It's very interesting. My mother is Irish Catholic, my father is Lutheran. I study Middle East, Islam.
So there's hope.
Yeah,
Yeah, and on that line, I want to suggest that most of the people who voted for Trump are not that different. They could be, with a little bit of help, I think, turned.
Why do you believe that?
Because I know some of these people. They are not intrinsically evil. They are scared. They feel that they have borne a lot of burdens. Their jobs are either gone or insecure, and they'd love to have somebody to blame. They would like to have someone who's going to fix it. I don't know why they picked Trump, but they're people not that different, a little bit different, but they haven't had the kind of experiences that I've had. They haven't had the religious, God knows I've had religion every day, all the time, which pushes me. Some of the religions push in the other direction, but that's not a religion that I can want anything to do with, and you know what we're talking about. I learned that really early on with Gabe. gays in the family.
Does that inform your consistent work for minorities?
It informs everything I do. The other thing that informs everything that I do is a Peace Corps stint in Nigeria. My first child was born in Nigeria, and we were the hit of a wide swath in Nigeria wherever we went. Wow, can I touch it? This was a miracle to see that they were born that way.
Yeah, we have teachers who also like they're Caucasian Americans who converted and they studied in Africa in like traditional, like in huts, and they were the only white people like they've seen period ever, and people watch them like their television.
It's true.
Yeah.
Oh, it's true. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just saying, those are life-changing experiences, and I don't know how anybody that had that kind of experience could not be affected. And our parents, your parents, my parents, often didn't, and they're not to blame. I mean, they're just who they are upon circumstance.
I wanted to go circle back to your question about whether or not to engage people who just are diametrically opposed. And again, just borrow from Brother Sami's presentation, and that is that some, particularly Islamophobia, is actually manufactured. So it's exactly like corporate manufactured Islamophobia. One of the sources you might look to is called Fair Inc., and it's all about how much money is put into the propaganda. So when you trace the money, it's not just your typical person down the street that doesn't know the Muslim. It's like purposeful fear-mongering to affect an agenda in this country. So you're not going to be able to counter that with tea. You're not going to be able to counter it. I look at the statistic almost every time I speak because I find it so hard to believe, and I always want to make sure I get my sourcing right. But when Ben Carson was campaigning, every time he said something crazy about extreme Muslims or radical Muslims, the next day his campaign coffers went up by $1 million. $1 million. So it became a profitable business. Islamophobia business is a profitable business. So we're dealing not with just the common, let's get to know each other, but we're also resisting a well-oiled machine.
How do you challenge a machine like that? What are some of the basic?
To expose it. Anybody see the documentary 13?
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched it. It's really good. It's on Netflix.
I think they put it out for free.
For free now.
Yeah.
I watched it and it turned my stomach upside down, but then I also started thinking, replace the words black or African American with the word Muslim, and that's a documentary that's going to come out in 5 years about Muslims and the Islamophobia machine. I guarantee you could see sort of the makings of what's happening in the system and how fear is shaping policy. And we're talking about policy, whether it's the immigration ban, whether it's the see something, say something. You know, what see something, say something? You start to conjure it up in your mind. You're like, oh, you know, see something, say something. Yeah. You're on a plane doing algebraic formula and somebody's looking thinking it's Arabic and you're about to bomb the plane. Next thing you know, you're walked off. This was happening every week last summer of Muslims or people that people just thought were Muslims. But that was because we've been brainwashed. If you see something, say something, which came from 9/11. And which is subliminal messaging to tell you that Muslims are always suspicious and should always be treated with an air of suspicion. It's true. It's in our framework. The severe and extreme monitoring of Muslims, surveillance of Muslims, all of that is very, very bad policy. It's Islamophobic policy, it's xenophobic policy, it's hateful policy, it's racist policy. But fear sells. Fear wins elections.
From a personal perspective, I think Sami touched on this a little bit in his presentation, is how he travels differently now. Despite being innocent, despite being like somebody who's an interfaith social activist, doing a lot of good work, is that he puts his crown somewhere else. When we're in rural areas, I know like you feel differently, right? Could you talk a little bit about that impact on you personally, and then how do we work against these feelings, or should we work against these feelings in ourselves as Muslims?
When my son started college 4 years ago, I attended the parent orientation. And in that parent orientation, we talked a lot about date rape.
Yeah.
We learned that when a girl says no, it means no, and these are the circumstances you can find yourself in where it may feel ambiguous, but it's always no. And girls are taught how to keep themselves safe. Boys are taught how not to offend. And I think as Muslims, we have to do what we can to keep ourselves safe. And if that means not making salat in your chair in the plane because it could make you unsafe, meaning someone might hurt you, you may be removed from your flight, then maybe you modify your behavior to keep yourself safe. But I had a know your rights call with a longtime police officer. And he said, your job is to get home safely every night as an African American, as a young man. And that's how I see it for Muslims. Your job is to get yourself home safely every day. And so, yeah, I don't go to gas stations where I don't know where I am. Yeah. I just can't afford to expose myself and my children to that. I'm on a plane, I'm a good girl. I'm not taking pictures, I'm not speaking loud. I just kind of want to blend in. Yeah. And to me, that's okay. Because again, I have a mission, is to get home to my kids at the end of the day.
So err towards practicality and safety.
Totally. And remember, as Muslims, what are we taught by the Holy Rasul Islam, which is that our Holy Last Messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, has always taught us moderation, respect to your neighbor, respect to your fellow countrymen. And so you can do that without feeling like you're engaging in erasure of your own existence. You can be considerate and say, you know what, that might make somebody nervous. So, you know what, I'm just gonna pace myself a little bit. I'm not saying deny who you are, but just be mindful. That's how I.
And it doesn't seem like you've given up your faith even in a public space or anything like that. Like you're still authentically you,
totally.
while taking precautions.
Totally. Yes.
I think you've spoken about your siblings a little bit. If you had a little sibling who converted to Islam, what advice would you give them about, or if they look like us, what advice would you give them about being themselves or taking precaution? What message would you have?
That's a hard thing for me to think about. Not that it's offensive or anything, just it's never crossed my mind that safety was be something that somebody in my family would have to think about. I have personally tried to say to myself, there are people who don't feel safe, so how do I try to not create a situation in which they're going to fear. But yeah, I guess my privilege is that I don't think about stuff like that, and that is a huge privilege. I can't add anything.
I think that's an answer in and of itself. Sometimes we were doing some interfaith work as part of an Abrahamic program for young adults in upstate New York during the summer, and there would be a lot of non-Muslims who would come to us and they say, "Why don't you do X, Y, and Z?" And again, like we were already doing X, Y, and Z, which they were telling us to do, but there was this idea of giving advice to people without knowing without walking their shoes. And to step back and listen sometimes is sometimes the most effective thing we can do. We have about 10 minutes left. We have some questions from you guys. Please feel free to ask whatever. Get them out if you can. So, and if you could introduce yourself as well, just what's your name?
Sure. My name's Sam. I wanted to ask, as a Muslim and as someone who's worked with refugees, what surprised you most about working with refugees, particularly focusing on Muslim refugees or Syrian refugees who aren't Muslim? What surprised you most? What kind of shocked you most about that?
About which piece? About work? About getting to know people? Are you asking what surprised you most about getting to know like Syrian refugees? So I haven't had that experience yet, but I was at a talk the other day, and a Venezuelan immigrant, undocumented immigrant, came up to me. He was speaking Spanish, but he came with an interpreter, and he asked me, what do I do if ICE comes and sees me? And that was a question that I'm really not capable of answering, and I wasn't capable of answering that in that format, in the setting that we were in. But you know what, that was my first time looking someone in the eye who had that vulnerability and expressed it. And his children were there, and his wife were there, and they were kind of like eating the donuts in the back, and that humanized them for me. Otherwise, they're just people I see going to the grocery store or waiting outside for their kids' school bus. But at that moment, it changed for me. Like, this is an actual family. This is an actual man who has actual fears. And that changed things for me. Again, I walk this world that I never needed to have that interaction. But I'm glad that I did. Yeah, I'm glad that I did. And then I referred him to an immigration attorney and then offered to do some more outreach, what have you. I don't have all the answers, but man, that really touched me. That really touched me.
I know we adopted a family at Trinity College. We actually had two families. We were preparing for a Syrian family, and then we got a family from I think Ethiopia, and it like completely threw us for a shock because all of our team support system all knew Arabic, and then we got a Syrian family. And one of the things that really struck me over the last year is that the level of gratitude that they have for the littlest things that we don't even think are, because we're so used to so many of our privileges and so many of our things just in our routine that we don't realize how much one ride 2 minutes away to pick up milk is for them. Like littlest things to babysit for an hour, something that we wouldn't even think of. These aren't even things that would really make our lives more difficult. There is no favor you can do, or I don't know how to phrase that in a nicer way, but like there's nothing you could do that's too small. You know, like even there's a story that we've all heard is like there was a bunch of starfish washed onto the beach, and the one guy, he's throwing them into the ocean. And they go, why are you wasting your time throwing these starfish into the ocean when they're all going to die on the beach? And he goes, it matters for that one, right? And so it doesn't matter whether you can give your whole life to this mission or whether you can just help someone with their groceries. Like, whatever you can do is enough, and it's good, and they'll be extremely grateful for it.
I want to echo that. I've traveled widely, and everywhere I go, if there's any reason for somebody to say thank you, they say thank you, and they are welcoming at the drop of a hat. This kind of wears on you after a bit, and you say, why isn't it like that at home?
Yeah.
And if you want to figure out a way to get it at home, sponsor a refugee family, because they know how to say thank you, and they say it all the time, again and again, for no reason at all that we can see, except we're there, and they feel safe with us, and that's a good reason to say thank you, and it's a good reason for us to do it. It is hugely rewarding, the work you do. They can't pay you. I mean, they don't pay you enough to do it, but the reward is the way we feel.
That's true. I think we have some other questions. I see you in the court if you have any questions. Yeah, in the back, please.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zach. My question is more for Sister Tahirah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned like you have like a non-Muslim family because your parents converted into Islam and everything. And you kind of mentioned your own like interfaith experience within your family. I was just kind of curious, like, if you have any advice for like non-Muslim family, because I also converted to Islam, and I was just kind of curious what kind of experience you had or advice or things that worked for you and your family.
That's a great question, and of course Facebook is where the revolution occurs always. But I think my non-Muslim family, especially my cousins, were, they knew that we were Muslim, that wasn't a problem, but they probably didn't really know what we believed. They knew we had dietary restrictions, but they knew we made salat, but it wasn't deep like that. So when all this stuff about Islamophobia started happening over the past couple of years, all of a sudden my cousins in all these states, especially in the South, started posting things like, and tagging me. This is my cousin and she's Muslim. But that was their response to like anything negative on their Facebook page, because they really didn't know what else to say. So what I would, if I had the opportunity to have a family reunion, to say to them, I may not be embarrassed to say these are just some of the things that we believe, and if you need to respond to things, and now I get a lot of private messages, so I saw this article, can you help me? Because now they are more comfortable to say, I really don't know. If I had a wish, and I had my cousins and aunts and uncles sitting in front of me, I would do like a 101 with them and just say, these are some of the things you may see, this is the response, here's some sourcing, here's some facts, and I'm here. Yeah, that was a sort of a lesson that I learned. I think my parents, their siblings, and my grandparents knew more because my parents were required to justify why they adopted Islam as a religion. But after that, it became a non-issue, and so this next generation, the cousins weren't having, the 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds weren't having deep talks about, those things. So I think we lost a little bit of that in my family structure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's a great question.
So one of the kind of trends that, with this and so many other issues that I'm seeing is that there isn't enough support in the school systems for education about interfaith relations. And one of my own experiences from growing up in a very non-liberal family, being a very liberal person, is that there's a lot of pushback about education about other faiths and really anything that isn't kind of intrinsic to.
Was your school system also like that?
So I grew up, I was originally sent to Catholic school, and I kind of got kicked out for questioning the existence of God in science class because they were teaching creationism, but that's a different story. It was 6th grade. And my town was very Jewish, very, very Jewish. So it was a very interesting dynamic. Our social studies teacher got into a lot of trouble at times for the material that he brought up because he was like 25 and very hip and liberal, and he was very comfortable talking about all kinds of very controversial issues. And it was there was so much politicizing of what we were learning. And so what I think everyone would like to see is having a more open education system and including this in coursework, including it with things like bullying and the university is making us right now do like a not any more anti-sexual harassment program. So things like that. How do you avoid that kind of the political mongering that comes with like, you're trying to convert the kids to this horrible religion? Like, how do you implement those educational reforms without?
I think just the fact that you're questioning it is significant because remember ALEC, the lobby group that was in 13? They are behind some really nasty legislation, especially in the South, to get rid of any conversation in curriculum about Islam. So it's designed, it's not really that anybody cares that it's trying to convert. It's really not. It's about removing it so that it stays a mystery and so that it stays scary. Again, I'm all about giving people the facts. Like, let's just talk about this is a Muslim. This is what they believe. These are the holidays they celebrate. It doesn't have to be that deep. You can study Islam from a historic perspective. It's not that deep, except for the people who make money off of the fear-mongering, for the people who think that the next generation will be raised to have no clue that Muslims believe in all of the prophets from Adam all the way up to Abraham, and including all of the history. That right there removes so much question. But if you're not teaching it in schools, then it's much easier to exploit the lack of information. So how do we get around that? We call it out when we see it. And I'm almost at a point where I'd be saying maybe we need to have little classes off to the side. Because you know what else has gone from public schools? Civics class. So think about who that affects as well. Who's not voting? Who doesn't know how to vote? Who knows that your vote is at risk? Who knows how to vote in a primary? How to vet a candidate? It's not intuitive. But if it's removed from the classroom, who's teaching it to you? So it's no coincidence that these things are being slowly removed and that our children are losing their power, their authority, and access to information. And that's horrible. So maybe we start our own little classes giving children information. If we can't do it in the curriculum because it'll be too hard or too political or too much red tape.
I think mostly we're in a room with college students, a lot of political science, and people who are committed to refugees. If you have, this is going to be the last question, if you have one takeaway message for the group that we're speaking to tonight, what would it be, Tahirah, and then you?
My one thing is to challenge and speak truth to power. Just keep doing it. You're already woke. By virtue of the classes that you're exposed to, again, I don't care what you believe in politically or religiously, but if you see that there's a problem, speak out on it. Take little steps to correct it. That's all. That's all. You don't have to change the world. You can change one little thing.
I don't have a one thing answer. My history, I guess, suggests that organizing around one issue is a really good thing to do, but what we are dealing with right now is just a whole range of interconnected stuff. For me, the refugee thing is a very hands-on thing to grab a hold of. I'm not sure what that means on a college campus, though. Adopting a family on behalf of the universities is something I think that's huge, but I don't quite see the University of Connecticut coming around to that very soon. I'm just a little, I don't have that knowledge to impart.
Yeah, and then I would just say that do your homework and know that it's generally not simple solutions to complicated problems, you know. And you guys are hip to that, I'm sure. You realize that there's a lot more. It's like the way you learn history in 5th grade versus the way you learn it in college versus when you're doing your master's, and you realize that it's a little different than it first looked. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that if you see yesterday the same way today as you did yesterday, that means you haven't grown. And to continue to grow, one of the things you talked about is you don't have to change the world, but maybe you could change one little thing. I did a Teach for America stint, and I was for a small amount of time, and I saw a teacher, and before I went in, I asked the teacher, what can I do in this small amount of time? And he said, the best thing you should aim for is to change one person. And if that person is yourself, that would be the best. And so this is a process of self-transformation. We want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your support. Thank you, Imam Aziz. Our panel, if we give them a round of applause, Ms. Tahirah and Mr. Hughes.
Spending this evening here. Sorry, not to cut you off. Again, we'd like to thank all of our panelists, including our MC. We are more than 10,000, a student organization. We've recently established ourselves as a nonprofit. So in terms of doing one thing and making a singular type of impact, you can join our organization, stay involved with us. We have a lot of exciting things planned for the future. So again, thank you so much to our panelists, to Imam Aziz, and have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you.